whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process, he or she does not become a monster. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is all about uncertainty, politics, the country's economy, as well as the way forward. Our guest this evening is quite an interesting character. He is now a parliamentarian, was a former minister, also a former presidential candidate. Any guesses? Let me introduce our guest this evening tonight on Face the Nation. He's none other than the leader of the Democratic Left Front, parliamentarian Vasudeva Nanayakara. Ms. Nanayakara, nice to have you on board. Tonight on the show, we're doing things a bit differently. We are going to ask you a few quick-fire questions to get a feel of the background in which Ms. Nanayakara is hailing from. So the first question is, your full name?
Vasudeva Nanayakara.
Age?
80.
Entered politics in which year?
Around my 15th, 16th year.
Spouse?
Mrs. Nanayakara.
Children?
3, daughter and 2 sons.
Names?
Tarushi is the daughter, Chiranja is the eldest, Sankaja is the second.
Profession?
Sorry?
Profession?
My.
Yes.
I am a lawyer by qualification, but I have not been a practicing lawyer for long.
A trade union
I've
activist?
been more a professional politician. There aren't professional politicians. I don't like that term because that gives the career effect to a politician. What I want to say is my full-time work is politics.
Political affiliations?
Democratic Left Front is my party. We are affiliated with the larger alliance led by Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa.
Right. So now let's get into the bolts and nuts of our interview this evening and our topic of discussion. Ms. Nanayakara, I don't want to go back very far, but I want to just drag your attention to the 25th of January 2019, where there was no quorum in Parliament. Now, in your years as a parliamentarian, how many times have you seen the Parliament going silent? The PC polls debate was put off, and the provincial council polls was something that your party, as well as the large alliance that you spoke of, the United People's Freedom Alliance, have been canvassing for many, many months, many years, we could say. However, no quorum, less than 20, and the Parliament had to be adjourned. Isn't this a pity? Public's money being wasted over and over again? The time starts now.
I have been in Parliament since 1970. On dates when business is not controversial, the tendency is low, particularly when it is a adjournment motion of one party, the other party is not present. What I mean is, when we moved this adjournment motion about the provincial council elections, the UNP was nearly totally absent, and we had about 20-30, but I thought we would be able to keep the 20 throughout, but that was not the case. We didn't have sufficient numbers coming in to replace those who were going out.
Mr. Nanayakara, there is a saying that goes well with politics. There are no enemies and friends in the game of politics, at least. How far is this statement true?
No, that is not correct. We have our enemies or adversaries on the basis of policy and ideology. Therefore, they are unchangeable.
So let's take your history back. I want to drag your attention to the year 1994, when you started your career with the People's Alliance that was led at that time by...
Not a career.
But your political journey again, once again.
My journey.
By journey, I would correctly mention as a journey with the People's Alliance, with Chandrika Bandaranaikumartunga as the head of your government at that time. And then in the year 1999, there was disagreements, and then you crossed over to the opposition. and then you contested under your party, and then contested for the presidential elections as well as a candidate, and you emerged 7th. So you say that there is no enemies in politics, but that did happen in the year 1999 when you did cross over to the opposition, Mr. Nanakara.
I came into politics through the LSSP, and the LSSP was in an alliance in 1970, and since then we have been in that broad alliance, anti-UNP alliance. That's how it could be described. I have consistently remained anti-UNP.
Right throughout. Then why did you cross over to the opposition in the year 1999? What was the reason behind
Because
that?
Chandrika was found to be following the UNP policies at that time. I used to describe her as the political daughter of Jaya Javadana.
But where does this equation stand? Because an individual who contested a presidential election in the year 2000 now is canvassing on behalf of someone else. We would see individuals in your caliber also trying to vie for the top spot or the top job in the political
No, I couldn't follow you. Sorry.
An individual of your caliber in the year 2000, having entered the political fray in the year 1977, one would imagine 1970, one would imagine that you would be contesting at a presidential election once again. But we now see Mr. Vasudeva Nanayakara canvassing on behalf of other politicians.
Right.
Why is this?
I happened to be the candidate of the Navasama Samaja Party in 1982, and I think looking back and reflecting on that decision, it was wrong for us to have contested against Kobakadua from a 3rd position of the left. When the division between the left, or rather the UNP and the anti-UNP forces were being polarized, Colvin shouldn't have contested, I shouldn't have contested, nor should have Vijay Veera. We should have pulled our strength together with that of Kobakadua, while differing on certain policies.
Ms. Nanakara, in the year 2017, you were spotted using foul language in Parliament, and this went viral.
I've forgotten about that incident.
And people would have expected an individual of your caliber to have at least apologized, but that did not happen.
Maybe because
and a few months after, again something of this sort repeatedly happened when MP Harsh De Silva raised a question, and there was another issue again of MP Vasudeva Nanayakara using foul language in Parliament, and
that was with the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, yes.
Yes, that's the only time.
And again it happened in the year 2017 after you spoke about President Mahinda Rajapaksa and saying about it's a blessing to be under him. I can't use the exact terminology you used, but it was a blessing being under Mahinda's XXX, and was a great blessing. And you said this in the year 2017.
No, I don't recollect that. I recollect this incident with the Prime Minister, about which I didn't regret nor apologize, because he was the cause of that incident. He imposed himself on my right of speaking at the time when I was on my feet, and I told him to sit down twice. Then he asked me to sit down. Then the we crossed one another in our speaking to one another, and this happened to spurt out from my mouth, about which I think I was justified at that time, given my cultural background.
Do you also justify the fact what happened after the 26th of October 2018, the way in which parliamentarians behaved in the parliament floor? The incidents that unfolded after 26th of October, the conduct of parliamentarians. Do you also endorse that, Mr. Nanakara?
The accused of that incident is the speaker. The speaker misbehaved, and the speaker arrogated to himself powers that he did not have. The speaker enunciated a new doctrine that 113 should be shown by whoever is being appointed to govern, for which there is no such provision in our constitution. And we said that would be proved in the course of governance. If we cannot get the majority, we cannot continue to govern. Then we face a vote of no confidence, then we lose. There is no question of having to show 113 prior to commencing the governance with which we are entrusted, which we think was constitutional.
So if the party at that time, the United People's Freedom Alliance, along with the Sri Lanka Podjana Peramuna, had a majority in parliament, why weren't your party able to show that?
Majorities are made in the course of governance, as you might have known from the past. Not that they are ready-made. So we were prepared to govern and take the chance of getting 113 persons to support us, provided everybody is present in the house. We don't have to have 113 if everybody is not in the house.
Yes.
Then we have to have the simple majority according to the numbers present.
So Mr.
the
Nanakara,
question of 113 does not arise.
So Mr. Nanakara, if that is the case, if you're saying that the process of governance will show the numbers, why can't you bring in a no confidence motion now and defeat the Prime Minister who is now in power?
Precisely.
And then take over?
Precisely.
Why aren't you all doing that if that is the case?
No. The question is why we were doing so then. Why we were doing so then. My answer to it is we thought in the course of our governance we would be able to garner the numbers. Well, that again depends on how many are present in the house. If the numbers are less, then we don't have to have 113 to get the majority.
Mr. Nanakara, before I open the floor for questions from our journalists, Sonali Wanik-Baduge and Deshan, Mr. Nanakara, who is it that the Democratic Left Front is supporting at the next presidential election? Is there any candidate?
Not yet decided. We are together in one alliance. We want this alliance to be broadened. We want this alliance to become the largest anti-UNP alliance that we have so far forged, which should include Maithripala and his party as well, including such other parties who may come in. We must leave the doors open based on a program and policy, and we should go into contesting the UNP's candidate or UNP-backed candidate as a major alliance.
Because based on the current constitution, it's quite clear that former President Mahinda Rajapaksa cannot contest the upcoming presidential election, which is going to be held next year. Then you have Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who also has said very openly that he is also ready to contest an election if the people are ready. And then you have Chamal Rajapaksa, who has also said, yes, me too, why not? So you have a few names that's coming up as far as the next presidential election is concerned. And you've also here President Maithripala Sirisena not directly announcing, but political parties or affiliates around him saying that he could be the next possible candidate of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party as well. So in the event these names do crop up, which individual would the Democratic Left Front led by Mr. Vasudeva Nanakara would put their weight behind?
Democratic Left Front, being a part of the alliance led by Mahinda Rajapaksa and being a part of the largest alliance we will put together in the near future in order to prepare ourselves to meet the challenge of the presidential election, we would come to a decision after debating the pros and cons and the merits of each one of those candidates whose names are already there. Maybe there will be more names. At the end of it, we will come to what you call democratically centralized decision.
Among those names is the name of Vasudeva Nanayakkara also in, or is he too old now to
I don't think I am able to go through a campaign so hard and strenuous as that in this age and time.
But it's going to be an anti-UNP campaign for sure, and you would support a individual who will come from the Sri Lanka Podjana Peramuna or the Sri Lanka Freedom Party based on their policies and...
Agreed on.
Agreed on
The
policies.
important point is agreed on
Right. Well,
by our alliance.
Right.
If there is no agreement, then there will be a split.
Yeah.
That would be to serve the UNP.
Ms. Nanayakkara, very quickly, before I open the floor for questions from our journalist, I recollect interviewing you as well as former minister who was in charge of COPE, Mr. D.W. Gunasekara, and also Professor Tissa Vitarana. It was you, Professor Tissa Vitarana, and former minister D.W. Gunasekara who were hand in glove at one point. And there was a story that said that you all had told former President Mahinda Rajapaksa not to go for a third term in office, to complete his tenure as the
I have given
president.
in writing.
You've told him in
I have
writing?
given in writing to my dear friend and Honorable Mahinda Rajapaksa not to go for a third term. The 18th Amendment was not democratic, and this would be a bad precedent set up when a person would remain president for lifelong.
And based on all this, you still put your weight behind the Sri Lanka Podjana Peramuna led by President Mahinda Rajapaksa. In your opening statement, you said so. And I'm
While
trying to
being
wonder
critical.
what
While
is
being
the
critical-
political ideology of
While
the
being
leader of the
critical of his
Democratic
decision.
Left Front.
While being critical not only of that decision, several other decisions he made, I have been critical. But when it came to the final point, we stuck together as against the UNP, while being internally critical.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vasudeva Nanayakkara. I open the floor for questions from our journalists. On to my immediate left is Attorney at Law Sonali Vanagabaduge, who just appeared for a case at the Supreme Court today. And on to my far left is Deshan Gonawala. I open the floor for questions. The questions that I posed to you, Mr. Nanayakkara, was because you took a very strong decision in the year 1999 to move from the People's Alliance and sit in the opposition. And you were one of those members who took that bold decision at that time. And then one would have expected you to do so prior to the 2015 presidential election as well, but we did not see that coming. So I open the floor for questions from our journalists. So yes, let's start with Sonali.
Thank you, Shamir. Mr. Nanayakkara, the current stance on the 20th Amendment to the Constitution, which calls for an abolition of the executive presidency, where do you stand on this?
I am for a parliamentary form of government,
Right.
not for a presidential form of government from the beginning. And that has been the general policy of the left,
Right.
because we considered the presidential authority too authoritarian, and we are not used to that. And there is no reason or justification historically for such authoritarian governance at the top. However, now come to the exception. In this present context, when the division of power is in two centers, one with the parliament and the prime minister, the other with the president, we would not accept a merger of the two, when the Prime Minister would become the sole and only powerful personality, because he represents the imperialist interests. That is where the exception comes in, though our principle is that we should have a parliamentary form of government. In the present context, we wouldn't want Ranil Wickremesinghe to be the sole power in the leadership of governance.
Right.
Therefore, we would like the present two-centered power structure to continue.
What was the stance you took when it came to the 18th Amendment to the Constitution?
My stand was that we shouldn't have brought the 18th Amendment. I argued for it. I gave in writing. But when it came to the final decision of voting, I said I stand with the government to which I belong.
So you
even
voted for
though
the
in
18th
principle
Amendment.
I do not agree with the 18th Amendment, which I said in Parliament in so many words.
So there was
It's
a
in
bit
the
of a
Hansard.
contradiction there.
It's in the Hansard. I say I am not in agreement with this 18th Amendment.
However, you
I do
voted
not
for it.
want to give advantage to the UNP in this contest. Therefore, I will vote with the government.
As a senior veteran career politician, if I may call you that, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with the way the country is being governed at this present juncture?
Well, to say it very briefly, we are in the worst of times than ever before.
Mr. Nanayakkara, I want to pose to you this question. I want to ask you how you mentioned there were certain policy disagreements, especially pre-2015, and you are also not satisfied with the way things are happening at the moment, like you just mentioned. Now, does the current opposition, as the alternate force to the party in government, have a set of policies that can take this country into the future? Because if you've realized, or what the public perception is, that is your unique selling point as the opposition is the former president and his popularity. What is it that you plan to do differently this time around?
Well, we have to continue with the policies that Mahinda Rajapaksa championed when he got elected in 2005. Firstly, to end the war, and secondly, to develop a national economy. Thirdly, the pledge to democratize the country. Fourthly, to initiate a resurgence of our rural economy. Fourthly, to develop the infrastructure rapidly. These are the policies we have to continue with, and we have to safeguard all our natural and other assets which are state-owned and national-owned without being sold out to anybody, foreigners or locals.
Mr. Nanayakkara, along that line, I want to ask you now, one of the key policies that you mentioned was infrastructure development. But if you go through the history books, a lot of the debt-leveraged infrastructure projects that were done.
Sorry?
A lot of the debt-leveraged infrastructure projects that were carried out during that time has not shown a sufficient return on investment. Are you in support of...
gestation period, that depends on the gestation period. If you take any great big irrigation system that we, like Mahavali, the gestation period is long. You cannot have results and returns immediately after the scheme is put into effect, or maybe it takes years, maybe it takes Norichole for instance, would take years before we begin to get returns after having paid out the capital.
But one could argue, Mr. Nanayakkara, and this is a point that has been put forward by the then opposition that was headed by the current Prime Minister at that time, that, for example, the airport in Hambantota, the Mattala airport, particularly was not necessarily a good investment. I'm going to keep aside the allegations of the birds and the stories about the elephants, but I want to ask you, for example, the population density in the Hambantota district is relatively low, whereas you could argue it could have been better used in a lot of other places.
Well, even I thought at the time when this was being discussed that Mattala airport was not very urgently necessary, that we could wait for it after having constructed the Hambantota port, and when it is in real bloom, that we can think of the airport. That's how I looked at it. But then I was told by those who knew better that an airport built about the same time would correspondingly and complementarily support one another in bringing about the investors into the area.
Mr. Narakara, I want to ask you, if you don't mind, Shamil, I want to move this slightly towards another matter that was particularly sensitive during your time in government, is that of the ethnic issue, or the Tamil national problem, as Mr. Sambandhan calls it. Do you think your government failed in providing or in assuring the Tamil people that their concerns were addressed?
No. Firstly, we ended the war. I'm sure that is in the interest of Tamil people.
Of course.
Unless somebody says it is not. Then we brought to an end, together with the war, the continuity of the separate Tamil regime and the separate Tamil territory that flourished for nearly 30 years. And thus united the country.
Right.
I do not know if there are Tamil people who would disagree with me. I will not be surprised if there are who think they want their Tamil kingdom or Tamil territory as a separate state. So we have achieved two things. Next thing we achieved was to set up the provincial councils and also to hold the local government elections without any coercion, without undue influence, without using the armed forces, though the armed forces were stationed in abundance immediately after the war. But what happened towards the last stages of the war and immediately after the ending of the war may not be perfectly correct in every detail. We may look at them again and go through our lessons learned commission report of Mr. C.R.D. Silva, which gives some recommendations.
And none of the recommendations were implemented, Mr. Nanakara.
Sorry?
None of the recommendations were implemented during the tenure of
that is not
President
true.
Mahinda Rajapaksa.
Setting up the provincial councils?
I can name one. Directly.
Two,
yes.
The holding of local government elections after a long time, after nearly 30 years, and they being fair and free elections. These are achievements which were recommended by the Lessons Learned Commission. There were certain other recommendations towards which we were late to go. Maybe I would admit we were too late to arrive at the other recommendations which were a part of that report.
Ms. Nanakara, one of the issues in the LLRC, because you were also the former Minister of National Languages and Reconciliation as well, and you did some work during your time as the minister. The report directly holds responsible Karuna Amman, who was the Eastern Province Commander of the LTTE, for the assassination of many Sri Lankan policemen. he was the vice president of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party.
Yes.
And none of you all opposed it.
Why should we?
Why shouldn't you?
Well,
Why shouldn't you?
I will explain.
Yes.
Karuna Amman was one of the most important military figures of the LTT. And he was prepared to cross over to our side in the war.
During the tenure
We
of the United
accepted
National
him.
Party, during the
Sorry?
during the tenure of the United National Party, during the peace talks.
Sorry?
It was during the time of the United National Party.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
It was during the time of the United National Party.
He decided
that he
to cross
crossed over.
Yes.
So we accepted him as well because he was helpful in clearing up the eastern province to a very great extent in our war effort in 2009.
Okay, let's
And
keep,
therefore, in order to have him politically enrolled into the SLFP, as he was willing to do so, we were quite right in doing so, notwithstanding the past.
so was it the same law that was applicable when you all arrested Kumaran Padmanathan from Malaysia and brought him
Yes,
down?
yes.
What was the agreement between the government and him?
Kumaran Padmanathan was prepared to give us information that we didn't have.
What was the information?
I
that he
don't
gave?
know.
Yeah, okay.
Those are
Top secret
matters
information.
of what you
Because
call
there was talk about him having
He was prepared to give us
petrol sheds,
information.
he had vessels.
He was prepared to cooperate with us.
Yeah.
So therefore we accepted Kumaran Padmanathan. Well, these are not palatable to the
Is this
those-
right? Is this all right? That's
Sorry?
my question to you is
What-
this
what's
all
wrong
right?
about it?
No, what is right about it? Now see,
because
we
he
speak
was
about
helpful
Yeah.
in ending our war, in winding up our post-war action in order to prevent
No,
any
my question-
resurgence of LTTE.
Mr. Anakar, my
And
question is very
Kumaran
simple.
Padmanathan is an important figure who can give us a wealth of information in order to
Mr. Anakara, it's very clear.
Clear up.
It was very evident that Kumaran Padmanathan was the brains behind the LTT funding overseas. Do you
before.
accept it?
we knew it.
Right. Then where is those funds? Is he still keeping it
But
behind
they are
his
looking
drain?
for the funds.
They are still looking for the funds
Kumaran Padmanathan-
while having him in the government ranks, and you all are still looking for the funds?
I will not be able to answer that question.
Right.
That question will be better answered by those who handle the matter and whether Kumaran Padmanathan revealed the resources and where the locations are. In which event, whether those resources were collected by the government from those locations and brought and given and deposited at any point.
But there is no any
These
audit
are
records.
not matters
But there, but
within my peculiar knowledge.
but there is no audit records of these funds being in anywhere audited or counted
Well,
in
they,
government.
they
books.
have to be. They have to be.
So-
Kumaran Padmanathan must say, I gave information leading to so much of resources, so many billions. And those billions have been collected. Some source must say that. And they must be audited. They must be accounted for. Absolutely. I agree with you.
But right now it's in the thin air, Mr. Anakara. You spoke about not selling foreign assets.
Sorry?
Not selling foreign assets.
Yes.
And you say that you
Not
all-
foreign assets, our
assets to foreigners.
to foreigners or to
Or any-
local,
absolutely.
to
Okay.
the local rich.
Right. Mr. Anakara, let's go back again to your government era, where you sold the property of the Sri Lanka Army headquarters to several hotel complex. Is it not true?
No, no, no.
Then
That's not
let's
the way
talk
it
about the
happened.
Port City project.
That's not the way it happened.
How did it happen?
We
Please enlighten us.
We wanted
Yes.
Shangri-La to come in.
Right.
Shangri-La is a flagship hotel chain. If Shangri-La came, there would have been lot more to follow. So therefore, Shangri-La gave us a condition that they must own the property they build on. Then we came up with a problem that's contrary to our policy. Then we made an exception in the cabinet knowingly that this we will do only for this reason. And the money that we have been able to secure by the sale of the area which was formerly occupied by the headquarters of the armed forces has been used to build the headquarters of the armed forces in the new location.
Absolutely. Good point, Mr. Nanakara. Has this location or has this army headquarters been built and finished, completed?
No, no.
Why?
Still in the course of being constructed from what I observed when I passed that way.
Mr. Nanakara, you know that this project which was given to the construction company was made out of the regular tender procedure by the then former defense secretary. Are you aware?
Say it again.
Are you aware that the construction of this project in Akurekoda, the now only currently built army headquarters, was given out of the regular tender procedure?
Out of?
Out of the normal regular tender procedure was given outside, yes.
Outside the normal regular tender procedure.
Are you aware?
I'm not aware.
Right.
I'm not aware.
So isn't it a shameful thing to note that after getting so much of money from Shangri-La, we have still not been able to complete the army headquarters that was proposed to finish 2 years ago? And who should be held responsible for
3 years of governance by this UNP has to answer that question.
You said Shangri-La did make a submission saying, if you give us the property, and your thinking was that many other hotel chains many other hotel chains will also come to Sri Lanka as a result. Name a few that has come as a result of giving away the Shangri-La property.
I think Grand Hyatt.
Grand Hyatt has not come up.
No, it is under construction. It's 90% done. 10 or 12% more.
Yeah, but
in huge value.
Huge value, and it is up for sale. So Grand Hyatt is not coming.
I just gave you one.
Yeah, but Grand Hyatt is not
hotelier. Therefore, I wouldn't know
but
what
Grand
hotels
Hyatt is
have
not
come
coming
up thereafter.
Yeah, you're a parliamentarian, Mr. Nanaka, so you should know better than me because you are accountable for public money.
How parliamentarians come to know information they use in parliament is always through the secretariat. We tell the secretariat we want the following information. Then they provide. Then we use that information in parliament. Not that parliamentarians know all facts and figures about all matters.
It's better to be a journalist if that's the case, Mr. Nanaka. It's better to be a journalist if that's the case because
I suppose
journalists are more
parliamentarians
more aware of
to
public spending.
Parliamentarians' job is to engage in lawmaking, relevant to which you have to bring out facts and figures and which are extracted according to the needs relevant to the moment, and which is done more by our secretaries than by us, the librarians. Then we use them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anakara, for your thoughts in the first and second round. We're now going for a short commercial break. When we come back, we speak about uncertainty and the present state of affairs in Sri Lanka. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We are in conversation with the leader of the Democratic Left Front, a parliamentarian, Vasudevan Nanakara. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We are in conversation with a veteran politician, parliamentarian Vasudevan Nanakara. Mr. Nanakara, in one of your opening remarks, you said that this is the worst time as far as Sri Lanka is concerned. There is so much of uncertainty at present. In your opinion, what must politicians do right now? What must they really do?
Overturn this government as quickly as possible.
Overturning this government, is that the way in which people have to think? Because a mandate has been clearly given by the people for the parliament to function.
But they have violated the mandate. So they have lost their legitimacy. So what the people should do, we will exhort the people to overturn this government at the first earliest moment possible. That's how we look at it. Right or wrong, that's our understanding. This government is a curse on this country.
Mr. Nanakara, you are well aware that I am that the Supreme Court thought otherwise when the parliament was dissolved by the president.
Supreme Court didn't think otherwise. Supreme Court said, one, the dissolution is not legal. Dissolution of parliament is not legal. Two, they gave an interim order that the Prime Minister and the Cabinet cannot officiate because of the restraining order they had imposed. The final verdict is yet to come.
Ms. Anakara,
Those are the two decisions of the courts with which I thoroughly disagree. I reject those two decisions as undemocratic and contrary to the sovereignty that lies with the people.
Ms. Anakara, you should be well aware that you need to take full responsibility for the statement
I absolutely.
that you are making
Absolutely.
On this very
Absolutely.
show tonight. Because this is a live show, so as a person,
I know.
you need to take full
I
responsibility.
know the limits.
Ms. Anakara, you are very optimistic of making Mahinda Rajapaksa as the Prime Minister, and this was only short-lived. And he went down as the probably one of the shortest serving Prime Ministers of the Sri Lankan
Yes.
history.
Yes.
And isn't this shameful?
No. The shame is that we had to have a constitutional decision reversed and we had to resign. That is our shame, that we had to resign without plunging the country into chaos.
But right now there seems to be no option. The UNP-led government will be in power until next year, February.
Not so
first
sure.
come, excuse me, Ms. Alakara?
Not so sure.
Not so sure. But based on the constitution of Sri Lanka,
If everything remains where they are.
yeah, but based on the constitution of Sri Lanka, only a parliament election could be called after a
Well,
stipulated
you
time
see
frame.
there are
And
dissension within the parliament on the side of the government. There are new polarizations. There are the possibilities of new formations. All this put together, uncertainties are many, certainties are few.
it's quite easy to put that way, Mr. Anakara. But however, based on the country's, let's talk about bolts and nuts. Let's talk about the constitution per se. The first election that we see right now seems to be the provincial council.
Provincial council.
And
That's what we should have had even before.
so let's say there is a provincial council election in the next few months, hopefully.
Why are we not having the provincial council elections right now?
Why not?
Why not?
Why not? The president could
The
call-
government
Yeah.
manipulated legislation in order to introduce at the committee stage an amendment which was rejected by the courts,
Mr.
and
Anakara,
thus the postponement of the elections were ensured.
but
What do you think that is?
Mr. Anakara, what do you think this is? The parliament
What do you think
being-
that is?
How do you think this is? Parliament being adjourned because there was no quorum when the provincial council
Shameful.
debate was to be taken up and
Shameful,
public's money
shameful.
was being wasted.
I'm prepared to grant that I am ashamed that I am a member of that parliament which could not give a quorum to carry on with our provincial council debate. But worse, much worse, is the manipulation of lawmaking by introducing at the committee stage amendments which were turned down by courts. And this speaker kept on staying inside his room and kept the parliament going till about 7:30, 8 o'clock, past the time when we should have adjourned, only until the numbers turned up on the side of the garden. You think these are shameless?
Mr. Vavasudhir Ranakar, the parliament has been there for 24 hours wasting public money, staying the night because they want to show opposition. Is it that shameful?
No, no. what you are saying is
Because
that
now Speaker having sessions until 8 p.m. is shameful. However, parliamentarians holding ransom the parliament procedures for 24 hours, staying late night and staying the night, getting food of public money is not shameful.
not by with public money. The money, I think whatever food that came was at our expense. That's not the important thing.
Yeah.
When you protest in a parliament, there are ways and means of doing so. One is to come to the well of the house.
And that we see all the time.
One is to disrupt the proceedings of the house. When the speaker behaves in an absolute partisan way, when there is no appealing to his good senses anymore possible, then disruption. All these are a part of the democratic process.
Let's grab the speaker's microphone and then pour some water on the speaker's seat.
All that was a part of the provocation he offered.
So that is all democratic.
All democratic.
And then why was the recommendation made against 56 parliamentarians if all that was democratic?
Who made the recommendation?
There was the subcommittee that was appointed.
A subcommittee was formed by the speaker, and that committee had a majority on the side of the government, and then they bring out the verdict and then they want it executed. That is like the judge and the executioner being the same.
Mr. Ranakara, it's no secret, it's in the public domain. If someone goes to the internet and watch the video clip, they could pinpoint the fingers. There need not be a subcommittee to tell who was acting indisciplined in an indisciplined way in Parliament. You don't need a subcommittee.
This committee?
Yes.
This committee was set up by the
There was
speaker.
no need to have a committee. You just have to take a...
Sorry?
There was no need to have a
Don't
committee.
need a committee. If you watch the video,
you would
what
know
happened
what
in
happened.
Parliament,
Yeah.
that was good enough to come to your own conclusion. But find the culprit. Who is the culprit? But the speaker.
A parliamentarian was seen
What
slapping...
we were compelled to do was provoked by him.
So
you will always ask,
Yeah.
why did that man hit the other man?
Yeah.
But did you ask what happened immediately before that?
I'm not asking that.
The man could hit another man for justifiable reasons.
Mr. Ranakara, all that is agreeable. But my question is, why did a parliamentarian slap a policeman?
No, nobody slapped him.
They did. Unfortunately,
Nobody
I can't show
slapped
you.
a policeman.
I can't show you the video right
Policemen
now.
tried
But
to
this
barge in, intrude into the house. Then the policemen were resisted and they were pushed back. Nobody slapped a policeman.
Unfortunately,
I don't think any policeman complains that he was slapped.
Unfortunately, Mr. Ranakara, I'm not in a position, I'm not privy to that video right now.
I am prepared, even if you bring it later.
I certainly would.
Even if you bring it out later, I am prepared to say if I am wrong.
I certainly would, Mr. Ranakara.
If I am wrong, I am prepared to admit, well, I was wrong.
Right.
Now we see the man being slapped.
Yeah.
But why wasn't a complaint made by the police that he was slapped? Policemen won't easily let that go.
Mr. Ranakara, you have the Inspector General of Police right after...
Sorry?
You have the Inspector General of Police right after former President Mahinda Rajapaksa taking office as the Prime Minister, going to the Prime Minister's office and saluting the very Prime Minister who you, to the very IGP, you criticized in Parliament as well. You criticized a few individuals. That was the IGP, that was the Attorney General's department, as well as the Prime Minister in Parliament. And as a result of that, you used foul language when Harsha De Silva spoke at that time. And that was the little bit of words that I used right at the start, saying that you said about...
I couldn't follow you, sorry.
Mr. Ranakara, in a nutshell, what happened was...
Put in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, there was a policeman, the Inspector General of Police. You have criticized him.
Who went and saluted Mahinda Rajapaksa when he was appointed Prime Minister.
Yes.
And he said, sir, what do you wish me to do? Yes.
So you criticized that very person in Parliament as well on a number of occasions.
This IGP?
Yes.
Yes.
And that was all okay after that?
Well, not
Why
okay.
did you all remove him then?
Well,
after all taking over office?
Things don't become all right merely because he comes and salutes and says, "What do you wish me to do?" That does not exonerate him of all the other sins about which we have made allegations.
The number of days that you all were in power, 56 days, why did you all remove him as the Inspector General of Police then?
Too busy to do that.
Too busy to do that. So I open the floor for questions from our journalists. So let's start off with Sonali.
Mr. Nanayakara, in 2015, we saw the manner in which...
You will have to excuse me, my hearing is not very good.
No problem. In 2015, we saw the manner in which the government of good governance came in. People voted out the government of Mahinda Rajapaksa et
Agreed.
al. We saw the millennials voting. We saw the minority communities coming together. We saw a resurgence in this positive change for good governance, for accountability. However, you are now saying that you are looking forward to a 2020 election to bring back the previous government that the people voted out. Now, a majority of the people have a fear in them that we will be calling in a government of thuggery. A few moments ago, you justified the actions of certain parliamentarians acting in an absolutely unruly manner, saying we were provoked, that's why we acted that way.
Yes.
So, don't you think people are justified in believing that voting back in a government of thuggery will be quite frightening?
Do you think the thuggery of the speaker, which is insulated with the speaker's power, over which nobody has a say, can be justified, however partisan he might have been? Then on the next question, if the people will vote Mahinda Rajapaksa out, well, that is democratically accepted.
However,
Wait, one moment. If the people vote him back into power, that too must be democratically accepted.
so you still believe in democratic elections?
We have always believed in democratic elections.
But moments
I'll
ago
tell
you said
just
that...
give me a minute. When the democratic elections were disregarded by the UNP, we fought for democracy. I'll tell you from the beginning what happened. If I am
Of
given
course,
the time,
Mr. Nanayakara.
if you're given the time,
Yes.
firstly, you'll remember the plantation workers were disenfranchised. And thus the composition of the parliament was entirely changed by the UNP. Then the UNP at one time had 2 members for 1 electorate. The Supreme Court had to intervene and say, no, you can't have 2 members for 1 electorate. When Sarath Muttutugam was elected in the by-election, J.R. Javadana passed by a two-thirds vote in parliament that there must be another man who was the UNP candidate also sitting in parliament as a member for Kalawan. That is not all. The UNP, during its time when they governed this country in 1953, they killed 9 people, unarmed people, not insurgents, who were protesting against the price hikes and the unmanageable living conditions in which they were. I'll give you more about the democracy. Then in it was the lamp and the Kalagidi Chande, by which J.R. Javadana constitutionally got the mandate to put off parliamentary elections. We had no parliamentary elections under the UNP when it was due after that Lampu Kalagedi referendum. All those are constitutions.
What are you alluding
So I am trying to say how undemocratically the UNP conducted itself during the
let's
times
talk about the
when they
future.
govern. When they govern. Now I come to the point that you last said, I accept the democratic determination by the people. I accept.
But then moments ago you said that you're ready to overturn the government.
Of course we must overturn
That's not
this.
democratic.
No, wait. I'll tell you why it is democratic. It is overturned does not mean that we want to overturn by a rebellion or by a mass agitation or by a mass overpowering of the government. No. Overturn means we want to do it legitimately.
I see.
And we want to do it legitimately by voting out this government.
Okay, great.
And we had already voted out this government in the local government elections.
Okay,
And this government had lost all its legitimacy by its wrong policies, by its losing the confidence of the people, as manifested in the elections that were held. So on all these counts, this government deserves to be thrown out.
Right. Thank you for your
That is what I am
perspectives,
saying. But
Mr.
I am saying
Nanakara.
democratically, of course.
Right, great, fantastic. Now, let's talk a bit about this fear psychosis that I alluded to earlier. Now, for example, if you take certain groups of people, minority communities fear that they will be cornered by a possible Mahinda Rajapaksa government. Do you agree or disagree?
No, I disagree. The point is, if you are democratically elected,
Right.
the question of all the fears don't come into ultimate relevance. When in 2015, by a very small margin, Maitripala got elected and Mahinda Rajapaksa lost, he moved out of temple trees and went home.
Okay.
He accepted the democratic determination. So when the democratic determination comes, there is no point in saying that so and so is so worried about so much. I mean, there is no
However,
relevance.
it will be the responsibility of that particular government to
course,
ensure
yes.
the rights and
Of course,
responsibilities
yes.
of all the
According to
citizens.
the Constitution.
Absolutely.
Yes.
What about this fear psychosis about LGBTQ people living in Sri Lanka, their rights not being upheld?
I voted for it in the subcommittee which I was in at the
Right.
time of subcommittee deliberations for the Constitution.
Okay. So you're saying that LGBTQ people don't have to worry?
They don't have to worry. They have a right to live. They have a right to live as a community.
Equally, with equality.
Of course, with equality.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is the magic of democracy.
Thank you very much. You were at one time the Minister of National Integration, Reconciliation and Official Languages. We saw the manner in which there was a lot of pressure exerted on Sri Lanka with regard to alleged human rights violations.
They have no business to do that.
They have no business to do that.
They have
Okay,
no
so you
business
think
to-
that we need
We do attend to our matters in our country, determined by the people of this country. This Human Rights Council cannot dictate to us what we should be doing. They can suggest, they can of course inquire into matters, they can ask us to produce documents, account for certain things, which we will do, but no right to tell us what to do.
Mr. Nanakara, I want to drag your attention back to one of the statements that you made in the year 1953 that 9 unarmed individuals were assassinated. I'm dragging your attention to one of the statements that you made in the year 1953 that 9 unarmed individuals were assassinated by the United Nations.
Not assassinated, killed.
Killed.
They were protesting.
When they were protesting, right, in
as
1953.
unarmed protesters.
Right, this was in the year 1953.
53.
Why aren't you talking about the 2009 assassination of Lasantha Vikramatunga, who was
Why
also unarmed?
Why not?
Prageet Eknalikode, who was
Why
also
not?
unarmed. Keith
Why not?
Noyer, who was assaulted. Is all this undemocratic?
I am certainly concerned about the assassination of Lasantha Vikramatunga or the assault on the other gentleman who is a journalist, Keith Noyer, and I am concerned about Jayantha who had to leave this country. I'm concerned about all
Because
those.
you also went into hiding in the year 1983 after the 83 riots up until 1985, along with Vikram Bhaskaratna and Rohana.
83 to 85, no.
Rohana
83
83
to 84.
84, and then
end.
just
84 end.
just beginning
Yeah.
of 85. So
Yeah.
that was in January. So you went also into hiding. So
Yeah.
all this showed that democratic procedure needs to be adopted in Sri Lanka, right?
Democratic procedure was not available at that.
At that time, but at least now you say democracy should be established in the country, right?
Of course, yes.
So where do we stand right now, Mr. Nanakar, in terms of democracy? Do you think that today Sri Lanka is undemocratic? There is no freedom of speech? Is that what you're trying to say?
Freedom of speech is not the only democracy. Shall we try to understand, democracy for me means
Subjective,
the
again.
legitimate rights of the people to exercise their franchise. If that has been robbed, what democracy can you talk about? Where lies the sovereignty?
Who has robbed it?
Sovereignty lies
Mr.
with
Nanakar,
the
who has
people.
robbed it? Who has robbed
The
it?
UNP government.
How so?
I told you about that
If
particular...
that is the case, why not bring in a no confidence motion
You
against the
can't
Prime
bring a vote
Minister?
of no confidence.
Why is that?
In which you don't have a majority on our side.
Absolutely. So that is the point.
So therefore-
this was the same case in the when the 80th Amendment of the Constitution was
a
brought
fine
into play.
That's a fine argument.
No, but
That's a fine argument.
But even in
well,
yes.
however wrong,
Yeah.
if it had been passed by a majority in Parliament, it is right. That's what you
80th Amendment of the Constitution. I did not vote against
I'm
it.
not talking
I did
about-
not vote for
I'm
it.
not
You
talking
did,
about 18.
Nanakara.
You are jumping from
Yeah.
robbing the electoral rights of the people to 18th Amendment.
Just, so you just
No,
said...
electoral rights of the people
Yeah.
to have the provincial council election was robbed by a manipulation
Okay. Mr.
by
Nanakara...
this government. What democracy can we speak of if that be the 2.5 years local government elections were delayed? 2.5 years. And ultimately, the commissioner who was in charge of the delimitation said, I was asked by the minister to deliberately delay the proceedings in order to put it off. So all this happened under this government during the last 3.5 years. What democracy are we talking about?
10
Then
years...
ultimately, the local government elections are held and the government has a terrific defeat. They had to eat dust in the election results. At that point of time, the government has a duty to offer resignation. Look, the people in the entire country exercise their franchise.
Mr.
And in
Nanakara,
that,
I tried to say-
one
Yeah.
moment. You will tell me it's local government elections.
Yes.
But whether it is local government elections or provincial council elections or general elections, the people exercise their franchise across the country.
Mr. Nanakara, if that
Across
was
the
case-
country.
Samir,
And the results are that this government lost the election miserably.
Mr. Nanakara.
At that point of time, this government is ethically bound to say, we have lost the confidence of the people, we are resigned.
Mr. Nanakar, I want to ask you a question on the very grounds you mentioned, and I agree, yes, you do have an argument when you say on an ethical basis that when they have lost an election, that the government should maybe offer their resignation. But the thing is, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party also contested this election separately.
Yeah.
They had an overwhelming defeat,
Yeah.
probably the lowest they've polled in a
Yeah.
very long time.
That is why he broke up with the UNP
I
government.
agree, but the thing is, how is it that it's okay for the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna to go with what one can consider a defeated party? Is that not going against the mandate of the people?
No,
the people
they
have
are going to
rejected the
be-
SLFP in that case, isn't
They
it?
are going to be sheltered by our majority.
So you can assure that the Sri Lanka Freedom Party will not nominate a candidate now that they have been rejected by the people.
Well, we will come to that when we discuss the question of the candidacy. We are yet to come to the point of discussing the candidacy at the next presidential election. We will have all the names discussed considered, well considered, and finally decided.
I also want to ask you, you know, after the war, there has been a change in the hierarchy of needs of the people, and this tends to happen as time goes on.
There has been
A change in the hierarchy of needs. At the time, hierarchy of needs.
Need.
At the time, the basic need was to finish the war off.
Aye.
People voted in support of that. Now it is gravitating more towards the economy. There are significant allegations against the then UPFA government that they were not very good in managing the economy.
We were not very good in managing the economy.
Because of things like the debt, Mr. Nanayakkara. These are allegations that have been leveled. I want your response.
Why don't you look at the per capita income? Per capita income, we are not only the highest in our region.
Right.
We are the highest in a larger region, including some of the other countries in the Southeast Asian economy. So why don't we speak about our national wealth, national assets, value of that? So therefore, the debt is justified by the assets. If you build a house and you are indebted, your debt is no matter as long as you have built a house and you have mortgaged the house. So therefore, you keep on paying the debt and ultimately your mortgage is finished.
But if you earn 100,000 rupees a month and you have to live off that 100,000 rupees and you take a mortgage to buy a house in Colombo 7, it's not sustainable.
No, you won't be able to buy because nobody will give you such credit.
But isn't that...
You have to be building your house in Colombo 7 if you want it done that way. Then you get the value. Part of the mortgage is the value of the land. So therefore it is assets always justified. If you take a balance sheet, you have the assets, then you have the debit. The debt is justified by the assets. You take any company, any big company, the assets ultimately justify the level of debt of that company.
Mr. Nanayakkara, previously you used to have a pro-devolution stance. Does that remain?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. What is your take on this new process of constitutional reform which is going on?
There is no constitutional reform right now.
Right. Is it a farce or
Well, there is an ongoing process which has no direction or target.
Right.
No time schedule.
So in the list of
therefore
priorities of the government...
It is, well, you use the word fast. That's, I suppose, that is the word for it.
Do you believe that politics has to be an inclusive process?
What do you mean by inclusive?
It has to take into...
Processes are not inclusive. Inclusive are a community. We want inclusive development, which means that all people must come into the development.
I am glad you said that because you continuously try to exclude the United National Party.
No. United National Party is a party, it's not a community. United National Party includes people who are a part of our people in this country. So when we say inclusive development, it's the development of all people, not the UNP, but the people. The UNP is a political party organization. We are not looking at the people who support the UNP as UNP.
Mr. Nanayakkara, you bring in a good point answering one of the questions that was posed by Deshan. You say that based on the February 10th local government elections, it's ethically bound for the United National Party to resign their government rank.
Hold a general election.
Right, and hold a general election argument.
Agree to hold a general election, then we'll give 2/3 majority.
In your words, let's say that's a fine argument, Mr. Nanayakkara, but let's look at the 2005 the presidential election. We saw the northern province or Jaffna Peninsula not voting. And as a result of that, President Mahinda Rajapaksa gained a very thin margin and was elected as the president of the country.
Agree.
Let's take a look back. Let's go back to 21st September 2013 when you all had the local government polls for the northern province, where the Tamil National Alliance, which is now supporting the UNP, recorded resounding victory in the northern province. So if that is the case, it would have been ethically bound for President Mahinda Rajapaksa to resign as the president because he did not have the majority support of the Tamil people in the Jaffna Peninsula.
Jaffna Peninsula is not Sri Lanka.
Yeah, but that is
No,
a
I'm
deciding
talking about
factor.
Sri Lanka.
But that is a deciding factor.
No.
You just said so,
No,
Mr. Anakara. You just said that that was a deciding factor.
The Tamil people did not exercise their vote under duress
Yes.
or because of their own persuasion.
Yeah.
For that reason, we have had a majority, thin majority, which brought him into the presidency. Right.
But President Mahinda, Maithripala Sirisena had a better majority than the 2005
Certainly.
presidential elections.
But then also you look at 2010, he recontests, second term. Look at the majority that he was able to secure. So therefore, one outdoes the other. 2005 is neutralized by 2010.
As you say, Mr. Anaka, it's a fine argument to bring forth. We're going for a short commercial break, then we come back. It's the final round. We'll be discussing with parliamentarian Vasudevan Anakara, who was also the former minister as well as the former presidential candidate, about the way forward for Sri Lanka. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We are in conversation with the leader of the Democratic Left Front, the very vocal parliamentarian Vasudevan Anakara. Mr. Anakara, let's talk about Sri Lanka. 14 years after the tsunami happened, 11 years, 12 years after the war ended in Sri Lanka, why haven't we still been able to pick up the pieces and say, guess what? We are now moving forward towards development. We are now moving forward towards infrastructure development. We're now moving forward towards stabilizing the country's economy. Why haven't we as a nation not been able to do so in the last 18 years or so, or even the last 2 decades?
We have to put it more concretely. You have to put it more concretely. We have not had a growth rate sufficiently commensurate with our needs of development. The growth rate was about 6% from 2005 to 2015. Since 2015, the growth rate is 4%, 3%, and 3-point-odd%. That's how it remains. That is the failure of this government's policies. 2, the balance of payments and our widening gap of the balance of trade. That again is a wrong policy of this government when they allowed so much of imports without ensuring a corresponding amount of exports or a corresponding amount of foreign exchange earnings. And therefore, our trade deficit became wider during the last 3 years to nearly double it is about 10 billion, if I remember right. If I am not sure of the figure, correct me. It has widened over the years, last 3 years. So the balance of payment has also suffered therefore. But our balance of payment therefore had a deficit, a larger deficit than before. These are what we are going through right now. Then the result is the decline of the rupee in relation to the dollar. Because when you import a lot, the importers pay in rupees and ask for dollars to pay for it. So the more you ask for dollars, the dollar rates go up, the rupee rates come down. And partly due to the flight of capital from our securities.
So are you saying that the world economy is not to be blamed, but
No,
the
no, all that is contributory, but the policy of this government is more contributory. If you take the interest rates going up in New York, naturally attracts the flight of our capital. That is true. But the uncertainty of the local economic setup, the instability, uncertainty in policies, the conflict of policies about the country's development program, all these contribute to the flight of capital at the same time. Because the president is of one view. On the one hand, here is the free trade agreement with Singapore. President says, no, this must be reviewed. Then he appoints a committee to go into it. They come with a report to say the FTA is faulty, it needs amendments. When you have this kind of conflict about policies, it naturally becomes unstable. The more instability, more flight of capital. And more flight of capital, further decline of the rupee.
Mr. Lanka, very quickly before we wrap up tonight's show, what is your message? Now, there is no way to turn back. There is a Prime Minister in Sri Lanka, there is an appointed cabinet in the country, there is a President who is the leader of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party as well as the United People's Freedom Alliance. What is the message you have as a veteran politician?
This Prime Minister and this cabinet is a result of court decisions, not of the people's sovereign power.
Well, let's forget about all that, but what's the message you have for them?
But that is the truth.
Yeah.
And therefore the message is that we must have a program, realistic program for the most urgent and most important requirements of the country's social development. Social development cannot be achieved without economic development. So here we have to have our agricultural policy right. When productivity has to be increased in agriculture, otherwise you can't attract people to agriculture. Agriculture needs to be mechanized. Then agricultural output and technology has to be combined. Then we go into a higher level of industrial development. Then our mineral resources must be utilized in order to develop an industry for which we must ask foreign investments to come because they have the know-how and the technology. If I take the case of plumbago or what you call plumbago graphite. Graphite is the raw material required to produce the most expensive material today required in the rocket science. We can always keep on supplying our graphite to an investor who will come to produce graphene. And that would be the productable market, which would bring us huge amounts of foreign income. That's the area of development that we must look into in industry. Agriculture must necessarily be our bedrock of all development.
And you're saying about graphite and rockets being sent using graphene. It's not about putting the Sri Lankan flag of just because of the former president's son on a satellite.
That wasn't an encouraging experience.
So, Mr. Lanka, thank you very much for joining us tonight on the show. It was a pleasure to have you on board. A politician who has entered the political fray in 1970 and still is a formidable force in Parliament. However, Mr. Anakara, if time does permit to you in the next few years to come, I think you may have to you may, as a future prospect of Sri Lanka, I think it would have been apt for you to apologize for the use of.
Never.
But again, that's my view, because we see you from the day number one. I was born in 1985, and I've seen you in politics right throughout the last 33 years, and how you've come up and how you've been able to make a force. And if that apology did come, you would have definitely made an indelible mark in the mind frame of the many young future prospects of Sri Lanka in the future.
Thank you very much for all the compliments.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening on the show, Mr. Vasudevan Nanakara, leader of the Democratic Left Front, parliamentarian Vasudevan Nanakara. Thank you very much, Deshan, for joining us this evening tonight on the show. And thank you very much, Attorney at Law Sonali Vanagawadugay, for joining us on the show. I can just imagine how you are in court, Sonali. I don't want to even I don't want to even go there. Thank you very much, the gentleman and the lady, for joining us this evening on the show. I leave you tonight with the quote, as I always do. The past is never where you think you left it. Take care and good night.